I'm Terrywood from PokerRailbird.com, and welcome back to our video series, Poker Math Essentials, Mastering Odds and Probabilities. In this fourth installment, we're exploring a vital concept for increasing your profitability at the table, implied odds, the key to squeezing the most value out of your strongest hands. If you've been following the series, you'll know that in our last video, we covered pot odds and hand probabilities. That lesson laid the groundwork for understanding how to make sound mathematical decisions in poker. If you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, I highly recommend checking it out. It's the perfect foundation for today's topic. You'll find the link in the description below or on the Poker Railbird YouTube channel. In this video, we're building on those concepts to take your game to the next level. Implied odds aren't just about calculating what's in the pot now, they're about predicting the future value of your hand and how much you can win on later betting rounds. This knowledge will help you make better decisions, especially in situations where immediate pot odds alone don't tell the whole story. Over the next few minutes, we'll break down the mechanics of implied odds, look at real-world poker scenarios, and discuss strategies for maximizing value when you have a strong hand or high probability of hitting a big draw. We'll also touch on how implied odds interact with factors like position, opponent tendencies, and effective stack sizes, key elements for any serious player. To fully understand implied odds, let's start with a simple definition. Implied odds are the potential future winnings you can earn if your hand improves beyond what's currently in the pot. Unlike pot odds, which calculate the value of a call based on the pot size right now, implied odds factor in how much more you can win in future betting rounds. Here's the formula we'll be working with. Implied odds are calculated by adding the current pot size to the potential future winnings and dividing that by the amount you need to call. This formula allows you to assess whether it's worth chasing a draw or making a call that might look unprofitable at first glance. The beauty of implied odds lies in their ability to help you see beyond the immediate situation. For example, imagine you're on a flush draw. The pot odds might not justify calling right now, but if you hit your flush and expect your opponent to bet big on the next street, your implied odds can make that call profitable. It's important to remember that implied odds require sound mathematical judgment and some knowledge of how your opponents play. You need to consider how likely your opponent is to pay you off if your hand improves, the size of the stacks involved, since implied odds are limited by the chips your opponent has left to bet, your position at the table, which can significantly impact your ability to extract value. Let's break that down a little further. If you're up against a cautious opponent who's unlikely to call a big bet on the river, your implied odds shrink. Conversely, against a loose or overly aggressive player, your implied odds increase because they're more likely to pay off your big hands. Understanding implied odds is about thinking beyond the current moment and seeing the bigger picture. It's about recognizing when a small investment now can lead to big rewards later, and equally as important, when it can't. Next, we'll talk about how to calculate implied odds step by step, with specific examples you can use in your games. Let's examine a hand where we utilize implied odds to guide our decision-making. We're holding the ace of hearts and the jack of hearts in a five-way pot. The flop comes 2 of hearts, 9 of hearts, and king of clubs. The under-the-gun player checks, and the player in under the gun +1 bets $35 into a $50 pot. The next player folds, and now it's our turn to act. Based on our read, we believe the bettor may be holding top pair with a strong kicker, betting this amount to discourage draws like ours from continuing. From a mathematical perspective, they're correct. The pot odds we're currently being offered are 2.42 to 1, while the odds of completing our flush on the turn are 4.22 to 1, making this a negative EV call on the surface. Additionally, we're in a disadvantageous position, both in terms of pot odds and table position. With 3 players yet to act behind us, calling the $35 could inadvertently improve their pot odds from 2.42 to 1 to 3.42 to 1, encouraging them to stay in the hand and potentially reducing our equity. However, this is where implied odds come into play. The bettor still has $600 remaining in their stack, and based on their aggressive tendencies, we anticipate they will commit at least $90 more on the turn, even if a heart lands. This potential future action gives us implied odds of 5 to 1. The pot currently holds $50. Adding their $35 bet and an expected $90 on the turn brings the total pot to $175. Dividing this by the $35 cost to call gives us implied odds of 5 to 1. If players behind us also call, our implied odds improve proportionally, further justifying the call. By factoring in the likely future bets and the opponent's playing style, we turn a seemingly unfavorable situation into a profitable decision. This demonstrates the power of incorporating implied odds into your strategic considerations. The type of opponent you're up against also has a huge impact on implied odds. Against passive players, who tend to call more often than they bet or raise, your implied odds are stronger. These players are more likely to pay you off when your hand improves. On the other hand, aggressive players are harder to predict. While they can build bigger pots, they're also more likely to fold if they sense you've hit your draw. When facing an aggressive opponent, you need to factor in how often they might bluff or overvalue their hand, as this will directly influence your implied odds. One of the most profitable ways to leverage implied odds is by playing hands with hidden strength, hands like small pocket pairs that can turn into a set. These hands are particularly effective in deep-stacked games, where the potential payouts are much higher. Because these hands are often disguised, opponents may not see them coming. This makes them perfect for extracting maximum value from players who hold strong but second-best hands. Lastly, let's talk about multi-way pots, where implied odds can often be at their strongest. With more players in the hand, there's a greater likelihood that someone will call your bets when you improve. However, there's a flip side. Multi-way pots can also make it harder to realize your implied odds because of board texture. If the board is scary, like when it's paired or heavily coordinated, opponents may be less likely to commit chips. In all of these scenarios, the key is to think ahead. By understanding your opponent's tendencies, your position at the table, and the dynamics of the hand, you can better assess whether the implied odds make a call profitable. Additionally, in multi-way pots, maximizing value becomes both an opportunity and a challenge. With more players in the hand, the potential pot size grows significantly. However, you need to tread carefully to avoid giving opponents favorable odds to chase their draws. For example, if you flopped a set in a multi-way pot, your goal should be to size your bets in a way that builds the pot while still pricing out weaker draws. At the same time, you'll need to be mindful of reverse implied odds if the board texture becomes dangerous. Now that we've explored the fundamentals of implied odds, let's shift our focus to a critical question. How do we maximize value when we're holding strong hands? Whether you flop the nuts or are playing a premium draw, understanding how to extract maximum chips from your opponents is the hallmark of a skilled poker player. One of the best ways to maximize value with strong hands is by inducing mistakes from your opponents. This involves creating situations where they misjudge the strength of your hand or their own, leading them to overcommit their chips. For instance, if you flopped the nut flush, you might consider slow playing on the turn against an aggressive opponent to encourage them to bet. The key is knowing when to slow play and when to go for maximum value immediately. This decision depends heavily on the board texture and your opponent's tendencies. The art of bet sizing is another essential tool for extracting maximum value. When you hold a strong hand, your bet sizes should be designed to keep your opponent in the hand while still building a substantial pot. For example, betting too large too early may scare off cautious opponents, while betting too small can leave value on the table. A general rule is to bet an amount that aligns with the story you're telling, one that your opponent finds believable based on the action so far. Sometimes, the best way to maximize value is by letting an aggressive player take the lead. Against overly aggressive opponents, you can often profit more by checking or calling rather than raising, as these players are likely to continue betting into you. For instance, if you're holding a monster hand and facing a poker bully, allowing them to take the lead can lead to larger bets on later streets. This approach works particularly well when you're in position, as you can adjust your strategy based on their actions. Maximizing value doesn't just mean building the biggest pot. It also means avoiding situations where you overcommit with a hand that's likely second best. This is where reverse implied odds come into play. For example, if you're chasing a low flush in a multi-way pot and the action suggests someone else is drawing to a higher flush, you may need to exercise caution. Always consider the relative strength of your hand when deciding how to extract value. Let's not forget that position is one of the most powerful tools for maximizing value. When you're in position, you control the pace of the hand, deciding when to bet, call, or raise to extract the most chips. For example, checking back on the turn can induce a river bet from your opponent, allowing you to value raise and build the pot further. Conversely, if you're out of position, you may need to adjust your strategy by betting earlier to avoid losing value. Maximizing value with strong hands is all about balance, balancing your bet sizes, your approach to opponent tendencies, and your understanding of the situation. By combining these strategies with a solid grasp of implied odds, you can take full advantage of every opportunity to win big pots. While implied odds are a powerful concept for making more profitable decisions at the table, they're not without limitations. Relying too heavily on implied odds or miscalculating them can lead to costly mistakes. Let's discuss some of the most common risks and how to manage them effectively. The most common mistake players make with implied odds is overestimating future winnings. Implied odds rely on assumptions, how much more your opponent will bet if your draw hits or if your hand improves. If those assumptions are wrong, you could end up making unprofitable calls. For example, if you assume an opponent will pay off a big river bet, but they instead fold or slow down, your implied odds shrink drastically. Always base your assumptions on your opponent's playing style and the dynamics of the hand. The board texture plays a significant role in determining whether implied odds are realistic. Certain flops or turns can scare off opponents and reduce the likelihood of extracting future bets. For instance, if the board pairs or completes a highly visible straight or flush draw, even aggressive players might hesitate to commit more chips. On the other hand, if the board appears harmless to your opponent, they may feel more confident betting into you. Another key limitation of implied odds is the rule of effective stack sizes, the smallest stack between you and your opponent. Even if you expect future betting, your potential winnings are capped by how many chips your opponent has left. For example, if your opponent only has $50 left in their stack after betting $35, your implied odds are limited no matter how strong your draw is. Always check your opponent's stack size before making a call based on implied odds. While multi-way pots can offer greater implied odds due to multiple players contributing to the pot, they also carry a significant risk: reverse implied odds. Reverse implied odds occur when your hand improves, but it's not the best hand at the table. For example, chasing a small flush or weak straight in a multi-way pot can lead to losing a large pot to someone with a better draw or a stronger hand. Finally, implied odds are highly dependent on your opponent's tendencies. If you misread their style, your implied odds calculations can quickly fall apart. Against tight players who fold easily, implied odds are often lower than expected. On the other hand, loose or aggressive players may contribute more to the pot, increasing your implied odds, but at the cost of higher volatility. To summarize, implied odds are a valuable tool, but they come with limitations. Overestimating future winnings, misjudging board texture or opponent tendencies, and ignoring factors like stack sizes or multi-way dynamics can all lead to costly errors. By staying mindful of these risks, you can make better informed decisions and use implied odds effectively without falling into common traps. We've covered a lot of ground today, so let's take a moment to recap the key concepts and tie everything together. Implied odds are one of the most powerful tools in poker, allowing you to see beyond the immediate hand and plan for future betting opportunities. They help you make better decisions when chasing draws, playing strong hands, or navigating multi-way pots. But as we've discussed, using implied odds effectively requires more than just knowing the math. It demands a deep understanding of your opponents, awareness of stack sizes, and the ability to read the board texture, all while balancing risk and reward. Here are some key takeaways to remember. 1. Understand the basics. Implied odds factor in the potential future winnings beyond what's currently in the pot. Use them to evaluate whether calling or chasing a draw is profitable. 2. Be realistic in your assumptions. Avoid overestimating future bets. Base your calculations on your opponent's tendencies, stack sizes, and the current dynamics of the game. 3. Leverage position. Being in position allows you to extract maximum value when your hand improves, while being out of position can limit your ability to realize implied odds. 4. Combine metrics for better decisions. Always integrate implied odds with pot odds, hand probabilities, and stack sizes to form a complete picture. 5. Practice and review. Improving your ability to use implied odds comes with experience. Review your hands after each session to refine your calculations and strategies. Mastering implied odds is a skill that can elevate your poker game, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. In future videos, we'll continue to explore advanced concepts and strategies to help you dominate at the table. If you haven't already, I encourage you to check out the previous videos in the series, Poker Math Essentials, Mastering Odds and Probabilities, and stay tuned for our next installment, Expected Value in Poker, Making Long-Term Profitable Decisions, where we'll explore even more strategies to give you an edge. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your feedback helps us create even better content tailored to your poker journey. For more tools, articles, and discussions, head over to pokerrailbird.com and join our growing community of poker enthusiasts. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the tables.